My sister-in-law, Nora, who spent a decade mocking my poverty mentality and predicting I would amount to nothing, just got evicted from her 5-bedroom mansion and showed up on my doorstep in the pouring rain with her 2 terrified children, demanding we take them in indefinitely. But her desperate arrival was merely the first crack in a foundation of elaborate lies that would threaten to collapse everything I thought I knew about my wife, her family, and the very nature of the love and security I had fought so hard to build. I'll never forget the first time I heard the word poor directed at me with such cutting precision. It wasn't from a schoolyard bully, but from Nora, my then-girlfriend's impeccably dressed sister, delivered with a sweet, condescending smile that made the insult burrow deep and fester. "It's so admirable how you manage," she'd said, her eyes doing a slow, dismissive sweep of my thrift store suit at a family dinner I could barely afford to attend. "Most people from your background wouldn't even try to fit in. They just accept their lot in life." I was 22, madly in love with her brilliant and beautiful sister, Eliza, and utterly determined to prove I was worthy of her. My own childhood was a grainy, stressful blur of ill-fitting hand-me-downs, hushed arguments over utility shut-off notices, and the constant, gnawing anxiety of never having enough. My parents were kind, hard-working people, perpetually ground down by a system that demanded everything and gave back little. I swore I would escape that relentless cycle, and I did, through academic scholarships, countless sleepless nights studying and ferocious, almost desperate work ethic that eventually landed me a respectable, well-paying job in the city. But to Nora and her mother, I would always be the charity case on the wrong side of the tracks, a walking embodiment of struggle that Eliza had foolishly and embarrassingly picked up. Eliza, my beacon in all that darkness, was my staunchest defender. She was everything I wasn't: graceful, confident, and raised in a world of stability, summer homes, and inherent safety nets. She saw a strength and potential in me that I couldn't yet see in myself. When she said yes to my awkward, heartfelt proposal in the park because I couldn't afford a fancy restaurant, it was the single happiest, most validating moment of my life. Nora's reaction was predictably, professionally venomous. "You're making a catastrophic mistake, Eliza," she'd hissed at our small, modest engagement dinner, just within my earshot. "He's a leech. He'll drain you financially and emotionally. You'll be paying his bills and supporting his entire extended family within a year. You mark my words." My mother-in-law had simply nodded in tight-lipped agreement, her expression one of pure, unadulterated disappointment. We got married in a simple, beautiful courthouse ceremony with a few close friends. We couldn't afford the lavish wedding Eliza's peers probably had, a fact that fueled my ambition like rocket fuel and became the silent engine driving me forward. For 10 solid years, I worked with singular focus. I climbed the corporate ladder, sacrificed weekends, missed social events, and poured every ounce of my being into building a secure, prosperous life for us. The payoff was beyond my wildest childhood dreams. We bought a beautiful, spacious house with a garden in a great, family-friendly neighborhood. We took vacations to places I'd only seen in glossy magazines: Italy, Japan, the Caribbean. Last year, for our anniversary, I surprised Eliza with a diamond necklace that caught the light in a way that reminded me of the way her eyes sparkled when she laughed, a small token of my immense gratitude for her unwavering faith in me. We were happy, truly, deeply, and quietly happy. The jibes from Nora became less frequent, especially after she landed a wealthy, older businessman named Arthur, a man whose fortune was as vast as his personality was bland. She vanished into a gilded world of luxury European cars, members-only clubs, and social media posts that screamed of curated opulence. She made a point, at the few family gatherings she still deemed worthy of her presence, to remind us of her elevated status, subtly and not so subtly, pointing out how we were too mundane and domestic for a new, glittering circle. Then the spectacular public bottom fell out of Nora's perfect, Gilded World, Arthur's business empire, a complex web built on a mountain of debt, shell companies, and outright fraudulent deals, imploded with the force of a bomb. The financial news channels ran breathless stories about the federal investigation. He was arrested at his club at lunchtime, a perp walk broadcast for all to see. Their assets were frozen, their numerous credit lines severed, and their picture-perfect mansion, the backdrop for so many of her boastful photos, was repossessed by the bank. Overnight, Nora went from a millionaire's wife to a penniless, humiliated, single mother of 2 young boys, with a husband facing a long, almost certain prison sentence. That's when she showed up at our door, the storm outside mirroring the one that had just shattered her life. It was a brutally rainy Tuesday evening. The doorbell rang, an insistent, urgent sound against the drumming of the rain. I opened the door to find her standing there, drenched and shivering, her 2 small boys clinging to her legs, their faces pale and frightened. The haughty, polished confidence was completely gone, scrubbed away by panic and replaced by a raw, desperate fear. "He left us with nothing," she whispered, her voice cracking as tears mixed with the rainwater on her cheeks. "The lawyers, the banks, they took everything. I have nowhere to go, no one else to turn to." My heart, despite a solid decade of her relentless cruelty, clenched with fierce, instinctive pity for the 2 terrified children. Eliza, ever the compassionate one, rushed forward, ushering them inside from the cold, wrapping the boys in warm blankets, making them hot chocolate, and getting them settled in our guest room with a quiet, maternal efficiency that left no room for argument. That night, as we lay in our bed, the sound of the rain finally easing, we talked in hushed tones. We agreed we would let her stay. For the kids, it would be temporary. A brief pour in their storm, just until she got back on her feet and found her footing. It was a humane thing to do. But temporary stretched into weeks, then morphed into months. Nora made no tangible effort to find a job or an apartment. She spent her days lounging around our house, scrolling through her phone with a bitter expression, and making passive-aggressive comments about our quaint and simple lifestyle. She treated our home like a moderately acceptable hotel, and us like her personal, underappreciated staff. The tension became a thick, suffocating fog in our once peaceful home, a constant, low-grade hum of resentment that filled the spaces between polite conversation. The first major crack in this uneasy truce, the first sign that this was more than just her typical laziness and ingratitude, appeared one Saturday morning. I was working in my home office on a highly sensitive financial project for my company, a project that represented a potential multi-million-dollar account. I had printed out some complex charts and market analysis and left them on the shared printer in the hallway. Later, returning for a coffee, I found Nora not just collecting a page, but intently studying them, a strange, calculating glint in her eyes that I had never seen before. "Just curious what keeps you so busy all the time in here," she said dismissively, barely looking up as she hastily put the papers down. I wrote it off as her usual, irritating nosiness, but a small, cold seed of unease was planted in the pit of my stomach. It felt different. It felt purposeful. A week later, my entire world turned upside down. I was called into my boss's office without warning. His face was uncharacteristically grim. "We've had a major security breach," he said without preamble, his voice low and serious. "A key competitor, Axiom Corp., just launched a service product with features, branding, and pricing models that are identical down to the smallest detail to our confidential Project Chimera. The only people with full, unfettered access to those details are the members of your direct team and you." My blood ran cold, a freezing sensation that started in my chest and spread outwards. I was suspended on the spot, pending a full internal investigation. My professional reputation, my career, everything I had sacrificed and worked for since I was 18, was hanging by a thread, unraveling before my eyes. I drove home in a thick, disbelieving daze, my mind racing in frantic, terrified circles. Who could have done this? Was it Mark on my team, who I knew was angling for a promotion? Or Sarah, who had been acting strangely distant lately? Then, like a ghost from forgotten nightmare, I remembered Nora poring over my printed charts with that focused, acquisitive look. It seemed ludicrous, almost paranoid, yet the timing was too precise, too coincidental. When I got home, I was too upset, too humiliated to even speak. I went straight to my study, closing the door on the world. Eliza found me there later, sitting in the dark, and I broke down, telling her everything through a haze of shock and anger. Her face paled, her hand flying to her mouth. "It can't be," she kept repeating, shaking her head. "She's horrible, she's lazy, she's entitled. But she's not a corporate spy. She would know how." Desperation, however, made me cunning. The next day, I followed my normal routine, pretended to go to work, but instead parked a few blocks away and came back quietly through the back garden. While Eliza kept Nora distracted in the kitchen, I had a small, high-quality, voice-activated recorder under the sofa in the living room, a place Nora often lounged with her phone. It felt seedy and wrong, but the stakes were too high. Then I called Eliza and laid out the plan. She was to casually mention to Nora, in passing, that I was at a critical, emergency meeting with the company lawyers to discuss the catastrophic leak, and that I was likely to be fired and potentially sued. It was a bait, a Hail Mary pass born of sheer desperation. It worked with terrifying efficiency. An hour later, sitting in my car and listening through a connected app on my phone, I heard the recording begin. Nora was on the phone, her voice a hushed, triumphant whisper. "It worked perfectly," she said to whoever was on the other end. "My useless, poverty-stricken brother-in-law is about to be fired, and hopefully he'll lose everything. The payment hit my secret account this morning. It's more than enough. Once he's destitute and loses his house, Eliza will finally see him for the failure he always was. She'll have to leave him. She'll have no choice. And with this money, I can get a real fresh start far away from this boring suburb. It's a win-win, really." The sheer, calculated venom in her words was breathtaking. It was a level of hatred I had never truly comprehended. But it was the voice on the other end of the line, the voice that responded, that shattered my soul into a million unrecognizable pieces. It was a voice I knew intimately, a voice I had heard offer Christmas greetings and birthday wishes, a voice I loved. It was my mother-in-law's. "Good girl," she said, her tone dripping with cold, satisfied finality. "I told you it would work. We just had to be patient and wait for the right opportunity. He never deserved her. He never deserved to be part of this family. He was a stain. Now we can finally get our Eliza back, and she can find a proper husband, someone from her own world." I sat in my car, the engine off, trembling with a violent, all-consuming mixture of rage and heartbreak. This wasn't just Nora's petty, childish jealousy. This was a calculated, malicious, long-term conspiracy orchestrated by her mother to systematically destroy my life, my career, and my marriage. They had coldly and deliberately sold my company's most valuable secrets to a competitor to frame me, all with the explicit goal of driving a permanent, irreparable wedge between me and my wife. They were willing to see me jailed, bankrupted, and broken, just to get what they wanted. I didn't confront them immediately. The shock was too great, and the need for irrefutable proof was absolute. I drove directly to the police, and then to my company's head of security, with the digital recording. A joint investigation was launched immediately. It turned out my mother-in-law, using her late husband's old, trusted business contacts, had acted as a broker, connecting Nora with the executives at Axiom Corporation. They were offered a substantial six-figure sum for the information, transferred to an offshore account Nora had hastily set up. The digital paper trail, combined with the recording, made the evidence utterly irrefutable. The fallout was swift, public, and brutal. Nora and my mother-in-law were arrested at our home for corporate espionage, wire fraud, and criminal conspiracy. The look on their faces when the police officers calmly placed them in handcuffs was a grotesque mixture of sheer shock, disbelief, and then, finally, a boiling, naked fury. They screamed, they cried, they called me a manipulative monster, a liar, accusing me of setting them up in an elaborate frame job. But the evidence was undeniable, a stone-cold wall of facts. My name was publicly cleared at work. My boss apologized profusely and reinstated me with a substantial bonus for the undue stress and professional damage, along with a promotion to a more senior role, a tacit acknowledgement of my loyalty. The peace that returned to our home was profound, but was a peace tinged with deep, lingering grief. Eliza was utterly devastated. To discover that her own mother and sister had orchestrated such a monstrous, cold-blooded plot against a man she loved was a betrayal that cut deeper than any childhood wound, any past insult. She fell into a deep, silent depression, struggling for months to reconcile the people she thought she knew, the family she had loved, with the vindictive, criminal strangers they had revealed themselves to be. The cognitive dissonance was a prison for her. We started intensive couples therapy soon after, a necessary lifeline to navigate the profound trauma and the wreckage of trust. It was a long, difficult, and often painful process. Eliza had to mourn, in a very real sense, the loss of the family she thought she had, the loss of a mother and a sister. I had to learn to deal with the profound violation of trust and the painful, indelible knowledge that a part of her family would never, ever accept me, and would in fact actively seek my destruction. In the end, the court case concluded without a dramatic, drawn-out trial. Facing overwhelming, incontrovertible evidence, both Nora and my mother-in-law, upon the stern advice of their lawyers, took a plea deal. They were each sentenced to several years in a federal penitentiary, a fall from grace, so complete it was almost Shakespearean. Eliza's father, who had been largely absent and willfully oblivious to the scheming in his own home, was horrified and ashamed. He reached out to Eliza, full of tearful apologies and regret for not seeing the toxic undercurrents that had been poisoning his family for years. They had begun a slow, tentative, and fragile process of rebuilding their relationship, but the absolute childlike trust is gone forever, replaced by a cautious, arm's-length cordiality. As for Nora's children, their paternal family eventually stepped in. A distant but kind-hearted aunt on Arthur's side, a stable, childless woman who had always longed for a family, was granted full custody. We made the difficult, heart-wrenching decision to not pursue it ourselves. As much as we loved the boys, they needed a completely fresh start, far away from the poison, the scandal, and the bitter legacy of their mother and grandmother. We send gifts and cards on their birthdays and at Christmas, and we receive polite thank you notes in return, but we maintain a respectful distance for everyone's emotional well-being. Today, our life is quiet again. The storm has well and truly passed. The house is ours again, filled with a peace that is hard-won, deeply cherished, and fiercely protected. The shadow of their betrayal still sometimes stretches across our happiest moments, a fleeting chill on a sunny day, but it no longer darkens our every waking hour. We learned a brutal, unforgettable lesson about the terrifying lengths to which jealousy, snobbery, and hatred can drive people, even those who are bound to you by blood and supposed love. But we also learned with unshakable certainty about our own strength, both individually and as a couple. We stood together against a hurricane, a united front against the chaos, and we are still standing. Our love, tested in the fiercest of fires, did not break. It was tempered. It was forged into something stronger, more resilient, and utterly unshakable. We look to the future now, not with the naive, blind optimism of our youth, but with the resilient, clear-eyed hope of two people who have faced the very worst in human nature and, hand in hand, have not only survived but have chosen to build anew, together,